Hey, what's up guys? My name is Dante. I'm a guitar player and bass player turned audio engineer, looking to give you guys an inside look on how to get some really cool tones with single coils. More importantly, the high gain metal scene. Before I show you guys how to get that kind of tone, let's hop into a full mix to see what we're working with. Okay, so now that we have a full mix out of the way, let's kind of rewind a little bit and kind of go over why I kind of thought about doing a video like this. Main reason is because I haven't really seen many people really talk about using guitars that have single coils in them for like high gain, down-tuned, heavy music. I personally just really love the tone of single coils in high gain contexts, and I just kind of thought I'd make a video on this to show you guys who happen to have, single coils and are in heavy music, production stuff, whether you're a band, audio engineer, whatever. To kind of give you guys an insight on that kind of stuff. So with that out of the way, let's move over into HX Edit and I'll show you guys what I'm working with here. Now that we're at the desk, I'll show you guys just some screenshots of my tone that I ended up using for the mix that you guys heard. And it's honestly a super duper simple patch. I'm using the Line 6 Helix LT just for anyone who's kind of curious about what I'm using to get these tones. And I'm using Helix just because that's what I have access to in terms of modelers. Kind of take what I'm using here with the Helix and apply it to whatever you're using, whether it's a different modeler or plugins or real amps even. Let's go ahead and, with that out of the way, let's go ahead and hop in. So I think one of the most important parts of any kind of guitar tone is going to lie in your microphone choice, your speaker choice, and the position of that mic. So what I'm going to be showing you guys, kind of my speaker selection here. I ended up using two cabs. Both are kind of different from each other. I ended up using them to complement each other tonally. Our cartographer governor, which is like a 412 eminence loaded speaker with the governor speakers in there. I ended up using the M160 ribbon microphone, which is a pretty nice ribbon microphone, sounding ribbon microphone. I kind of wanted something a little different for this because I'm using this as my main speaker tone. I wanted something a little different than the standard V30 with 57 setup on it, and so I ended up using this one because I kind of noticed it had a nice tone that's familiar but also different. So yeah, that's what I ended up choosing for that one. And then for the second cab, I ended up doing the 412 Mandarin 30, or the 212 Mandarin 30, which is literally based off a 212 orange cab loaded with V30s. That's kind of where the familiarity in terms of speaker tones comes from. And the tone was that one. I did choose a different mic for this one because I'm aiming for a tone that is different from the standard, you know, 57 tone. So I ended up using the 47 condenser FET mic, which is based off the U47 with a FET circuit in there. If you're using a Helix and don't really know how to get to using both speakers, what you'll have to do is when you go to a block, you'll have to go down to cab, and then underneath the cab section, you can choose between single or dual. So you'll choose dual, and then you can choose whatever speaker, you know, cabinets you want to choose from. They have a lot in here. I'm currently on the 3.8 update or patch right now. But yeah, they have a lot of, you know, really cool stuff in here, some unique stuff, some standard stuff you'd expect. So if you're wanting to do a standard metal thing, obviously go something with a vintage 30 in it, and 57. That's the most standard tone, especially in high gain stuff. So go ahead and choose that if you want to. But if you want to experiment, feel free to experiment with what you have here. But now that we're done talking about cabs, let's go to the amp. Hey guys, future Dante here. One thing I forgot to mention when it comes to the cabs here is you're able to choose your mic after you choose your cab and your microphone type. You can also choose the mic position and the angle of the mic. Those, you know, drastically change your tone, so mess around with that. Closer to the center of the speaker, you're gonna get a brighter tone. Closer to the edge of the speaker, you're gonna get a darker tone. And also distance as well, so the closer you're going to get to the speaker, yeah, it's going to get more in your face and more low end because of the proximity effect with a majority of mics. And then your angle, so straight on at 90 degrees or your 45-degree angle, that will change your tone as well, so keep that in mind. And you can also there's also a EQ section as well, so you have a low cut and a high cut. I usually do a low cut at about 80 hertz and a high cut at about 9 kilohertz, just to save myself some time in mixing when it comes to mixing guitars. So that's why I do that. I do that for every mic or every cab I do in here. And then obviously there's level. The amp we're using in here is the Solo Lead OD, which is based off the SLO 100. Obviously pretty infamous amp. It inspired a lot of other different amp circuits. That's was kind of my main thing with this. I wanted a tone that was very familiar but also refreshing. So that's kind of why I ended up going with this one, because in most modern stuff now you don't really hear a lot of people, at least I haven't heard a lot of people use the Soldano. Something I did a little different than in here than I do with a lot of my tones is I ended up pushing the bass and drive knobs up a bit more, simply because the way single coils are, you know, standard single coils in, you know, the telly I just showed you guys at the beginning of the video in the mix, tends to be lower output. So being able to, well, because of being a low output, you're gonna need more preamp gain to get similar distortion levels. So you can kind of get away with using more gain than you would with a humbucker. Pushing the bass up gives you kind of that thickness you would get from a humbucker in a single coil. So that's kind of why I did that. Mid and treble is about what you would expect from a high gain tone. You're scraping the mids out a little bit and having, you know, the treble about where it is, maybe pushed up a little bit, so that's nothing super crazy there. And I just turned the master and the channel volume up a bit, just so you can get that pushed, you know, power amp section from that, which I really kind of like how that sounds. What I like about the Helix is you can a lot of the models in there that you can change the sag and the hum. The sag is kind of like a power amp compression emulation, so I turn that down just so I don't really get that compression, because it, to me, flubs out a bit. I really don't like when power amps flub out, so let's work out rid of that. Hum, obviously supposed to emulate this kind of like the hiss and the hum you get from high gain amps. I turned that down because I didn't really want that introduced to the signal, especially because I'm already using a ton of gain already. So I want and single coils, because single coils add a lot of noise, so I didn't really want that in there, so that's why I turned that down. That's enough talking on the amp section. Now let's move over to the last block, so the last of 3 blocks here, so this is the 3rd block. I ended up going for an overdrive. This is a very standard thing for those of you new to dialing in middle tones. Having a overdrive in the front of an amp usually tends to help tighten up the amp a bit. You're kind of using it as a clean boost slash like a very basic EQ to kind of push, you know, your brighter you know, important frequencies into your amp, that being like, you know, mid-range and treble-y frequencies, because that helps you really cut through a mix. So you kind of need those, you know, frequencies, so that's why you're using an overdrive in the front. The one I ended up using here was the Horizon drive. For those of you who aren't really into the genre, is Mitra Mansour's overdrive from his company. It's a really cool overdrive because what I like about it is the level and the brights. To my understanding, those knobs on there at 12 o'clock, so noon position, those are what would be maxed out. So you have, you know, extra level you can use. And so that's exactly what I did here. I used that extra, you know, bit past noon to push the amp even harder into saturation. Brightness, I turned up a bit more than about, you know, I turned up to 75% just to get extra brightness because I love bright guitar tones. Attack, I have it 3 because didn't really need to cut out too much low end information from the DI signal from the guitar, just because, you know, single coils aren't really low end heavy. That's about it. And then drive at 0.5, you can adjust drive to however you want. So that's it in terms of blocks, but there are a couple things I do want to touch on in terms of routing in the Helix for those of you who have never really touched a modeler before. Maybe this is your first time using a modeler, but it's going to change from modeler to modeler, so keep that in mind. The input section, you have a bunch of different things you could use here. Obviously, I just left it at the default one, which is the multi, which Line 6 has their own guitar, so with its own special output, you know, cable on it. I just left it there just because I didn't really feel like I needed to change it. What I like about this is you can have an input gate, so it's like a gate before the blocks. I just kind of set it to taste. I'm not going to go over how to use a gate, but gate basically cuts down whatever hiss your guitar introduces or your amps use. So this is going to be before all that, your amps and stuff. But yeah, so use that sparingly at the beginning, especially if you're going to be using a gate later down the line like I did. And then there's the guitar in Z, which is just basically your resistance, which is basically the Helix's reaction, like the resistance to a guitar signal. I cranked it all the way up to 1 megohm just so I can get the least resistance going in, so I can get the brightest tone possible, because I kind of like bright guitar tones. You may be different, so adjust that to how you like it. And then there's the output section. I just sent that to an XLR just because I was recording direct into my interface going into my DAW, which is Pro Tools in this instance, and this is kind of how I record 95% of my guitar tones is through my Helix into my interface, and I use XLR, so that's why I chose it. And that's honestly kind of how I'm assuming a lot of you guys are going to be using it as well, so just standard go to XLR. But if you're going to be doing some live stuff, you can change the output if you're, you know, going into a real amp or something. So you can go ahead and change that there if you want to, but I just left it at XLR because, again, I'm recording direct. One last important thing that I feel like a lot of people miss out on when it comes to dialing in tones and getting really good guitar tones, especially people who are starting out, is you have to make sure your instrument is set up well. If you don't know what that means, this basically just means the playability of the guitar. So you got to make sure that your neck is straight, your guitar is intonated with itself, so meaning intonation is basically just how in tune your guitar is with itself, so make sure that's set up. Lastly, make sure you have new strings on as well, because that will introduce, you know, the brightest tone possible when recording. You can always cut that out later if you don't want bright stuff. But I'm going to reemphasize this, I love bright guitar tones, so I always make sure when I'm recording I have as bright strings as possible. Last thing that matters is you. So what I mean by you is kind of your performance. So none of this is going to matter unless you are playing well, playing hard, playing accordingly to the track, to the part. So make sure you're doing your best to get your instrument and your, you know, amp modelers, your amp sims, your real amp to perform the best, and make sure you're performing at your best as well. With that being said, if you guys like today's video, feel free to like, subscribe, and turn on bell notifications to date what I'm doing in the music production scene. And if you guys have a video you guys want me to talk on, or, you know, point out and, you know, do all that stuff, any kind of topics you guys want me to talk on, definitely let me know in the comment section below. And with that being said, I'll see you guys in the next video. Rock on, guys.